Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Steven Universe video. This one is going to be my review for the episodes from week 3 of the Summer of Steven event. Steven's Summer Adventures, whatever you want to call it. The episodes I'm going to be reviewing today are Gem Hunt, Crack the Whip, Steven vs. Amethyst, Bismuth, and Beta. Now, Beta doesn't air in America until Monday as part of a two-parter, but it did air in Canada yesterday. I'm not American, so I just watched the episodes when they go up online wherever. So I will be covering that, so just be aware. I'll cover that at the end, of course. There's a last episode I'll touch on. So if you haven't seen that episode yet, just, I will let you know when I start talking about that episode, so you can leave the video if you don't want to get spoiled on that episode. But anyway, overall thoughts before getting to specifics on each episode. Overall, this week was much better than the first 2 weeks. The big highlights, of course, being that the episodes were much more connected to each other. Gem Hunt basically continued off Alone at Sea. It more or less, transitioned somewhat into Crack the Whip. Crack the Whip and Steven vs. Amethyst are directly linked to each other. And then Beta basically is, again, fairly linked to Steven vs. Amethyst in that they're kind of dealing with the same kind of arc. Bismuth acts more as a kind of special episode to itself, in that there's only a slight bit of continuity between Bismuth and then Beta. But overall, pretty impressive stuff. I think, I rewatched these episodes just prior to recording this video, just because there was so much that I needed to recap myself on everything that happened. And I didn't need to do that for the first 2 weeks, even though I was reviewing 11 episodes. But just for these 5, I needed to rewatch them, and that's very telling. This was a huge improvement. So let's get into some specifics. So first episode was Gem Hunt, and this was cool, getting to see Connie on her first proper mission. She's been training for this with Pearl, and it was really fun to see this interaction, Steven, Connie, and Pearl. Because Connie and Pearl, obviously their interactions are quite fun, because they have this connection over their kind of want to Rose in the past, Pearl protecting Rose in the past, and in present day, obviously, Connie protecting Steven. They have that kind of similarity to them. And then just Connie really wanting to prove herself on this mission as her first one. Steven being more of the kind of humor of this episode, of course, because he's like, oh, Connie's like, I brought all these supplies, and then Steven's like, I brought board games, and it's just like, good job. But the core of the episode was basically that on this mission, it was meant to be just this routine mission to get this kind of gem, but they end up countering these 2 monster gems. So they have to split up. Pearl goes after one, and then Steven and Connie argue to be able to go after the other one. And what happens here is that the big issue of this episode is that Connie wanting to prove herself, but she freezes during her first chance to really participate in a battle. Now, admittedly, Pearl ultimately praises her at the end, because all she wanted from the 2 of them was that they find out where the monster is and then call Pearl for assistance. And ultimately that's what they did. But Connie just took the fact that she froze when she was cornered by the monster, and ended up having to be saved by actually, basically Jasper arriving to fulfill her own goals, and not actually accomplishing that herself. But that's another thing. I assume they'll continue, whatever the next mission that Connie goes on is, that they will eventually get to that stage. But I think there's something to talk about with that in one of the other episodes that happens. But yeah, the kind of big thing in this episode is that Jasper returned. So straight away linked to Alone at Sea. This is what she's back doing. She takes out the 2 corrupted gems, monster gems, whatever you want to call them, and just basically goes off, leaves, doesn't even attempt to engage Pearl, Steven, or Connie. She just leaves with the 2 gems. She keeps them for a specific reason after pooping them. And it's this big moment of she's doing something in the background, she's got a plan, but we don't know what it is just now. So yeah, the Gem Hunt, good, but not the best episode, just because it was okay, the main focus is more Connie, and then introducing Jasper back into things. But fun interactions between characters. Next one, Crack the Whip, the kind of start of our kind of Amethyst arc. This was really good, because obviously, the one negative I have with this episode, actually, before I get into it, it kind of had the same issue that I had with Lone at Sea. I really liked the Lone at Sea, but this one did the same thing with regards to format. The first 6 minutes of the episode, 6 out of the 11 minutes are basically just this fun stuff. It's cool, fun interactions. But the important thing about the episode, what's really the key to the episode, is only given 4 or 5 minutes at the end. And it makes it feel a little bit rushed in that there was so much time when they maybe could have used to kind of give to the important part of the episode, but they didn't. And that's the only real negative I have with Crack the Whip, in that it's just okay, Connie and Stephen are training, Amethyst is kind of barely watching them do whatever they're doing, and then the end of the episode is kind of crazy action, big things happening, and it feels great. That's just the kind of the thing with this show right now. It's just a little bit kind of inconsistent with regards to sticking to a general tone of an episode and kind of theme where it's going, but thankfully it does pick up as the episodes progress. Obviously the key thing that happens here is that as they're kind of relaxing, Stephen and Connie are kind of playing in the water, Amethyst is there, the gems basically that Jasper kind of took kind of come back. So the corrupted gems come back, and then Jasper walks out of the water, and we get the fight. Mainly it's basically the Connie and Stephen kind of rematch against the corrupted gems, and then Jasper versus Amethyst. And Jasper versus Amethyst was the kind of key thing here, because it played on basically a lot of the stuff we've sort of touched on with Amethyst, but bring it to the forefront now, in that an Amethyst is meant to be bigger than our Amethyst. And I think we've previously got it established that she spent too long in the ground, and that's why she's kind of smaller than perhaps she should be. It's kind of implied that she should be more similar in height to Jasper, but she's more like Stephen's height, and kind of she's considered short and not quite what you'd expect from a normal Amethyst. And so she ends up losing this fight, but we see some of the similarities in regards to how they fight. They both do the kind of roll up into a ball spin attack, but it's clear that Jasper is just so much more powerful than Amethyst. And as much as Amethyst takes out one of the corrupted gems, which was a pretty cool move, establishing that Amethyst is still quite strong, she's no match for Jasper at all, and gets poofed in a really kind of big moment, just highlighting especially with what Jasper says to her, you're not good enough, and it really plays on the, I suppose, Amethyst's kind of self-esteem issues, which she's dealt with before, but it's just heavily hit home now what the case is. And so what I liked about poofing Amethyst was that you basically left Stephen and Connie in this super dangerous situation where it's just how are they going to get out of this? There's no one else around. Amethyst was the one protecting them. But we have the kind of moment where they fuse and we get Stevani again. And this was the Stevani moment I think everyone was waiting for, and I was super excited to see it. Stevani fighting, and see how the kind of gem powers work with regards to Stevani and stuff like that. And we see that, okay, Stevani uses the sword and the shield of Rose, both at the same time, and can even ride on Lion. Lion seemed to kind of respond a little bit more, and kind of almost take orders from and trust Stevani a little bit more, be a little bit more active than he is with just kind of Stephen or Connie individually. So that was quite interesting that he was kind of accepting that okay, you can ride on me for this battle. And it was just a really cool scene showing how skilled Stevani is, that the combination of Stephen and Connie makes for actually a really strong person. Obviously the sword skills of Connie, but Connie's lacking in experience. The gem powers of Stephen with a little bit more experience than Connie has, and then just them combined together, their overall bravery, better than the sum of the parts, and it just comes together for a pretty skilled fusion that is Stevani. And it was a really cool moment to see that Stevani could get the advantage over Jasper. So for Jasper's character, it further established that she's defeated by a fusion again, highlighting that she needs a fusion to become more powerful. and it really kind of plays on like something is going to happen with Jasper coming up as we approach the finale with regards to fusion, and really what are kind of what her thoughts on fusion are. Does she actually just want the power from it, or will she learn what fusion really means? But yeah, so they force Jasper to retreat. They don't poof her, but they do force her to retreat. And then immediately Amethyst reforms and we get her new design. But the interesting thing about how she reformed was that she did it really quickly. And we've seen her do this before, her reform very quickly. But they as she was like engulfed in light, basically, as she was reforming, you see her kind of form go from her usual size. It like for a second expanded out and became really big, but then immediately kind of shrunk back down. I almost got the impression that what they were going for there is either that she was trying to reform as the size that she perhaps should be, but couldn't, or else there's some sort of corruption thing going on, that she forced herself to reform too quickly and it almost kind of took over her or something like that. Not exactly sure what they'll do, but it's clear that there's still more to go with Amethyst going forward, and you can see by the end that she was shocked that Stephen and Connie as Stevani defeated Jasper, and felt a little bit bad because of that, because oh, they're better than me, and it led directly into Stephen versus Amethyst. And I really appreciated this, just like basically minutes after, in universe, minutes after Crack the Whip, Stephen versus Amethyst takes place, and you see Amethyst wanted to get involved in Pearl's training with Stephen. I really like the Pearl points thing and the Pearl prize pouch. It was a kind of fun thing, but definitely like the core of this episode being the way kind of Amethyst's self-esteem, how she sees herself, her kind of inadequacies, and then also adding in Stephen's thoughts on himself into that as well. And that you see during the training they do these 3 tasks, and Stephen wins all of them. He beats her in the foot race, showing that his speed is increasing. He beats her in the agility contest, showing that he's kind of a bit better at battle. And then he beats her in the kind of sparring match of the two of them against all the holograms. He gets the advantage there as well. He wins all 3 of them. And Pearl was thinking that Amethyst was holding back when she wasn't. She was actually trying as hard as she could. So definitely got across that Stephen is, out-potentialing her and becoming stronger than her. And so it really all came to blows when Stephen, aware of this, let Amethyst win at the video game they were playing. And then you get one of the bigger moments of the episode. Like, to me, almost more important than the scene at the end of the fight and what happens during the fight was the scene, like, prior to the fight happening. And just what she says in that, like, now I'm the weakest crystal gem. And her admitting that's how she feels right now. With Stephen more powerful than her, she feels like she's the weakest one. And the way she says it, it makes it come across that, like, oh, now you're no longer the weakest crystal gem, Stephen. So, like, that's how she saw him. And he gets annoyed. Like, we never really see Stephen get overly annoyed, but he gets annoyed here, and it's just like, he's offended because, one, like, that she always thought he was the worst, but then the other side of that is that, wait, all of you are always trying to, like, push me to become more powerful and kind of grow, to become stronger, and now you're annoyed at me because I am stronger? Like, what's going on here? And so they end up having this fight, and it's not your typical, like, fight between allies, where they're trying to prove one's stronger than the other. Instead, what this is a fight to basically say, look, we'll fight, I think you will win because I'm actually weaker than you. That they both have very little confidence in themselves, and actually think the other is so much better than them. So the whole fight is basically them not really thinking about what they themselves are doing, and more thinking about what their opponent's doing. So they end up both using a lot of attacks that they've never used before, and improving, but are complimenting the opponent on what they're doing, saying, like, oh, is that a new move? I can't believe how good that is. You're much better than me. Even though they themselves have just used a move. I thought it was a really good dynamic that I haven't really seen something done like that. Just this complete reversal of a kind of ally fight where it's just like, no, you're better than me, and it worked out quite well. Like, it was serious, but it never got, like, to the point where I thought they would go for, which was probably that Amethyst, hurts Stephen and then like stops before she like potentially like really hurts him, and then realizes it's like, oh my god, what's wrong with me, that I felt so wrong that I needed to get one out over Stephen. I had to prove myself to beat Stephen. That wasn't what they went for. It was just no. It was a battle of equals. They were both dealing with a very similar issue, and they both developed because of that. And at the end, you just get this idea where Amethyst, the way she feels is just that, as we know from Rose, like a gem is born knowing what they're meant to be, and for Amethyst, she was born knowing that she was meant to be like a quartz soldier, but her actual form is very small, and she's not big enough to effectively be a soldier. So she's very kind of down on herself. She's still dealing with that. Whereas with Stephen, it's more that like everyone expects me to kind of be exactly like my mother Rose, but I'm not Rose Quartz. I'm me, and he had dealing with the fact that he's different and stuff like that. So it was very well done. They held back on going like full on in on what everything that they needed to cover in this episode, but obviously it's clear that there's much more to come with Amethyst and stuff like that going forward. So yeah, next episode is Bismuth, I believe. This is our first 22-minute episode. So our first episode that is not like a two-parter, it's just one episode that is 22 minutes purposefully. And I think this episode, for me, the most thing that I highlighted was that this is something that the show should do much more often. They seem pretty set on their 11-minute episodes as the usual thing, but I think they should do this much more often, because the pacing of this episode felt good. I can't imagine how this episode would have worked if they had attempted to do it as like two parts, like Bismuth Part 1, Bismuth Part 2, and have like an episode separation part in the middle. This episode, I think, worked because it had the time to like introduce Bismuth and be like, okay, cool, Crystal Gem back. Set up that like there's something we don't know about her that's kind of we're suspicious of her. You get to kind of like, okay, weapons, and then she starts to introduce the idea of the breaking point, and then you get the kind of conclusion of the fight and the kind of sad reveal ending at the end. It just worked so well, and I think the show should do more 22-minute episodes because of that. But really great episode in what it dealt with. Some very kind of complex issues, kind of with regards to like the politics of war, the ideologies of war and rebellion and stuff like that, and just I suppose mainly the contrast between Bismuth and Rose in the past, and how similar it is to the contrast between Stephen and Bismuth in the present day. And I really like that basically through similarities to this situation to the past, we got a lot of information about the past. This was the episode that probably most heavily told us about the full extent of like the horrors of war, the war that happened, the rebellion against Homeworld. This one most heavily explained to us that like people died, gems were like cracked and like shattered all over the place. There was this final offensive by the Homeworld that destroyed basically all of the crystal gems except like Rose, Garnet, and Pearl basically. It was really like kind of powerful, and it kind of highlighted that like, are they ever going to give us like a flashback episode where we see some key events of this war and see exactly what happened? Because I don't know if this show is going to go that far. Is it going to ever show a gem being shattered and basically the death of a character? I don't know that, and I think that's the thing here with this episode, that it even approaching doing that. And what they did do at the end of this episode was just like, wow, if they ever go as far as to like shatter someone, it's going to be a big moment. And I think it worked so well that they've set it up. They haven't just kind of casually like destroyed all these characters. It still hasn't really happened yet. And then, yeah, with regards to the ideology thing, of course, the big thing with Bismuth is that the way she feels is just that Rose has basically let the rebellion down by not allowing them to fight as effectively as she believes they could. That if they were allowed to get this weaponry where it purposefully targets the gem and shatters them, that they would have done much better in the war. And all Bismuth sees is that Rose's kind of tactics and ideologies in the war just led to a lot of deaths on the rebellion side, to the point where there's barely anyone left, and the homeworld still with the advantage. And that's the way she sees it, that Rose should have allowed them to use the weapon. But she's not thinking of the fact that their whole rebellion was to change the minds of homeworld, to let them know that Earth is something different, that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And how are they ever going to change the minds of anyone on homeworld if they just come across as, criminals, as brutal rebels? And that's the whole thing. Rose has to kind of package her group as the good side of this. That they are the group that fights in the battles, but they purposefully never shatter any of their opponents. That they refuse to go that far. They just get their ideology across. And that way, the homeworld can never fully paint them as just completely being bad guys, like I assume the propaganda would have been. That way they always have this thing of like, you're killing all of us. We specifically choose never to kill you. You destroy these planets, and maybe that will change the minds of people. It obviously ended up not quite happening, and then Rose basically decision is kind of implied that her not making the decision to use these weapons basically left an opening for Homeworld to then lead this kind of crazy attack that led to all this gem corruption and led to the shattering of so many crystal gems. So really kind of big things being revealed, because like Bismuth is you very early get this idea that she's hiding something, and that she's very careful to make sure that like, okay, you don't know like the details about why I was gone for so long. You are not Rose, Stephen. Yes, you don't remember me. Okay, and then she kind of gets, back into the swing of things, just like, being all kind of friendly with Garnet and Pearl, and showing them the forge and all those weapons and stuff like that, giving them the training. They very clearly presented that there's something she's not telling everyone, and so it was very creepy a little bit when she brings Stephen out on her own to kind of potentially improve Rose's sword, but then reveals this breaking point weapon, and it's like that weapon is just, it's basically useless in a fight except for the sole purpose of just completely destroying someone. So it's basically like the nuclear option in weaponry against gems. Like you make, like in wars, like you make these deals like, no, we won't go as far as to use these weapons that just purely annihilate people, because that will just not help anyone. And I suppose that's the case here, that we won't do that because that's the worst option. That we are truly the bad guys if we do this. And it's kind of understandable on both sides. You understand why Rose didn't do it, because it would have marked them as the bad guys, but at the same time, Bismuth wanting to do it, she was hurt by the death of so many people close to her and wanted to stop that from ever happening again. And in her mind, the way to do that was to fight fire with fire and shatter the homeworld gems and stuff like that. And I suppose she lost sight of what the true ideology was, and that Rose just wants like kind of peace between everyone, but she was just Bismuth is so obsessed with sides that she can't see what the kind of real problem is. And of course it presents the idea that perhaps Rose and Stephen even now are kind of maybe too ideological, in that yes, this is a good ideal to have, but I think Stephen in this episode completely learned that you can't just talk everyone down. You have to at some point fight. If someone attacks you and won't listen to you, you have to fight back, otherwise you're just going to get killed. And it's clear that the exact same thing that happened with Stephen happened with Rose in the past. She was forced to proof Bismuth, and Stephen was forced to do it here. And it was a big moment. They made it come across that like he never wanted to ever do this. He never wanted to shatter anyone. He never wanted to poof anyone. And here we see that he has to poof Bismuth. Now, will it change anything about him going forward? That's what I'm not entirely sure. The idea that I was getting was that, okay, he's going to be aware of the fact that he can't just talk everyone down, that sometimes he will have to fight. And maybe he'll be a little bit more willing to kind of settle things via fights instead of talking going forward, in that he knows that it is the last resort, but if it comes to the last resort, he will have to fight and potentially poof people to get through to them in any way. I hope that's what they do going forward. They just make this important, that him doing that to Bismuth had an effect on him. I did like, though, that there was the thing of Rose never told Garnet and Pearl the truth about what Bismuth did, but Stephen is going to. Now, again, I think that's understandable from Rose, because if she had come out and said that, look, I had to prove Bismuth because she attacked me, because she got very aggressive about wanting to use his weapon, I disagreed, that would have created a rift in the rebellion, and everyone would have been wiped out. Because you, of course, would have had other people who agreed with Bismuth and wanted to use these weapons. You would have had people who just sided with Rose against using these deadly weapons. And it would have just created more of a worse situation within the rebellion. And she chose the option of just like, unfortunately, we're going to have to basically forget Bismuth. Sacrifice one to save the rebellion going forward. And I think it's kind of more understandable. It's understandable. But you also do feel a bit for Bismuth, and that she felt forgotten at the end. But she sees that Stephen is a little bit different, and that she is going to tell everyone what happened. And you could see that Garnet and Pearl were hurt by learning the truth, but they were understanding of it. But I think it's very clear Bismuth they'll address Bismuth again. I don't know how exactly they'll approach doing that, but something will happen, and they will use this character again. It felt far too important that this was just a one-shot character, one and done. They specifically didn't shatter her. They specifically got rid of the point breaker, breaking point thing for a reason. They'll come back to Bismuth, absolutely. But yeah, is that all there was to that episode? The bit of continuity actually I want to talk about is just that she did give everyone like weapon upgrades, in that like Pearl's spear was changed into a trident. Garnet got some kind of spiky bits for her kind of metal glove things, and then Amethyst's whip, which usually just has a kind of diamond-like thing on the end, now has a kind of spiky mace ball thing on the end. And that did continue. That's the one bit of continuity with Beta. When we see her using her whip in Beta, she does have that weaponry. So at the very least, Amethyst keeps the Bismuth weapon upgrade. I'm assuming the others will as well, because they didn't seem to overly imply that like Bismuth weapon upgrades for everyone else was built to shatter, just that they were upgrades for their weapons that she had kind of done in the past but hadn't got the chance to give them yet. So they're good upgrades instead of just purposefully to destroy like the breaking point. But last episode, Beta. So if you guys are waiting for the US airing of this episode on Monday with Earthlings, the two-parter, obviously you can leave the video now, but if you're up for this discussion and did watch it yesterday, here we go. So, similar episode, I think, to like Crack the Whip, Alone at Sea, in that there was a lot of fun stuff at the start of the episode, fun character interactions, and then the serious stuff at the end. It's a format that the show tends to go to. It worked a bit better here because I thought it was just fun that we kind of got to go out to the barn to visit Peridot and Lapis and see that they're getting on really well. They seem to have kind of found a kind of common ground, and there's a friendship there. They're kind of living together, and it's kind of quite nice. They both watched that kind of romance show, and they both kind of like it and are into it. They've kind of created art around the barn to kind of make it their own. And Peridot especially seems a lot more kind of confident now that the relationship with Lapis is a bit better, and she's kind of wearing her little bow thing, and she's just very happy to have guests coming around, and there's just a confidence within her that was good. I did find her a little annoying in this episode. I've never really found Peridot to be annoying before, as much as she is that kind of like kind of odd, kind of quirky character. There were aspects of this episode where I was just like, okay, can we please not have you like do that laugh after every single thing you say? Like, can we get past that a little bit, that you think you are like the greatest thing ever? A little bit. It just was the slightest bit annoying here, whereas like any other time I hadn't found Peridot like in any way annoying. It was just the slightest thing. Thankfully, more towards the end of the episode, the serious parts of the episode, I didn't feel that way, but early on it was just like, you're a bit like, it feels a bit like you're overdoing it here. But anyway, the key part of this episode is obviously that Amethyst is in this, and she still feels down about what happened. She's like, why are we going to visit these two and doing all this, like, looking around, house visit, basically, when I could be, like, training and doing serious stuff? She's still obsessed with fighting Jasper to kind of prove herself. So that's still an issue. And basically what happens is that Peridot comes over and starts to kind of explain some stuff about the kindergartens where some of the gems were made. And we get this idea that Jasper was actually made at a beta kindergarten, whereas Amethyst was made at the actual kindergarten. So Amethyst actually had the better chance to grow into a better gem, in that her kindergarten was perfect, whereas the kindergarten that Jasper came from was actually really shoddily thrown together. Like the chances of someone coming out as well as Jasper did are super low. And we even get to see the hole in the kindergarten where Jasper came out of. And we get it explained to us basically some of the details about how this works. In that her hole in the wall was massive, and she explains all these kind of geological reasons behind why it's so perfect. Like the glass goes all the way back, it's so straight, it's aligned, it's perfect with the injectors and stuff like that, and it's amazing how perfect Jasper came out, versus Amethyst, who had the chance to become something great, but obviously it's implied stayed in the ground too long and ended up coming out short. So it's this kind of opposite kind of thing that they have going on here. I'm not really sure what they were doing that did kind of reverse kind of thing from one came from a bad place but was perfect, one came from a good place but turned out lesser. I'm not really sure what they're going for there. Perhaps it's more that Jasper, because of that, feels that she is, I suppose earlier Jasper felt like she was perfect on her own. She was the strongest individual gem out there. No one could beat her. And then when she encounters fusion with Garnet, it kind of changes her view on things, and that I need another person to combine with me to become more powerful. But she still doesn't get fusion. Even to this day, she doesn't understand the true meaning of fusion. It's just, she just sees it as a power-up rather than a relationship type thing. Whereas perhaps what they're going for with Amethyst is that she's going to have to accept that she's not individually the most powerful person, but with the people around her who support her, who Jasper doesn't have, she can fuse with them, a variety of different things, and become powerful in that way. And just with teamwork, she can defeat any individual power loss. I don't know if they're going to do that, because I feel like this arc is building towards individual personal growth for Amethyst. Now, that personal growth could be acceptance of the fact that she is not as powerful as she perhaps could or should have been. But I'm not really sure what they're kind of building towards. Either way, there's going to be a confrontation between these two. Something's going to happen, and it's going to have to involve something with regards to how Jasper views fusion, and potentially Amethyst using fusion is my speculation, but I'm not entirely sure. But, overall, again, solid episode. I like seeing Peridot. I like the group that we have here, Steven, Peridot, and Amethyst. They're very much kind of implying that, Jasper isn't the greatest villain or threat, hence why, we don't have most of the gems here. Garnet's not here because she can defeat Jasper one-on-one easily. Pearl's not here. Lapis isn't here because they're so powerful, if there's enough of them, they could easily take out Jasper. So the threat hasn't really been fully established just yet, but it's clear she's captured a lot of corrupted gems and has them caged here, preparing for something, because we know she's preparing this army. For what reason or goal, we're not exactly sure. So that's my view on the episodes. I'm excited for next week because it looks like we're basically getting the season 3 finale, start to season 4, and it should be really cool. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episodes, your thoughts on what I've said about the episodes. But other than that, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.